business webinars. This one has a specific focus on sustainability. In the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, we use the term responsible business to cover a range of sustainability obligations in development or underway that businesses need to be aware of and to adapt to. In this session today, we will have 3 presentations. I would ask that you, if you have any questions, that you enter them in the chat, and we will take the questions as a group at the end after the final presentation. Any questions that we don't get around to answering, we of course will take further on, and there'll be a holding page with a web address to send it to. For further information, just to be aware that this webinar is being recorded, and we will have available on a responsible business webpage on our department website, which is also a handy place to find any reference links to the various regulations and initiatives underway under the responsible business banner. So as I said, today we have 3 speakers on a range of topics, including, first of all, my colleague Paul McMahon, who will be speaking on the OECD guidelines for multinationals. And he will pass on then to our departmental colleague, Elaine Lynch, who will be speaking on a timely presentation on the implications of the Green Transition Directive, which amends 2 existing consumer law directives. Lastly, but not least, we have Joanne Sheehan from Enterprise Ireland to give you important information on sustainability capability development supports, quite a tongue tie there, available to businesses from the agency. But first, we have a message from our recently appointed Minister for Trade Promotion, AI and Digital Transformation, Niamh Smyth.
Good morning, everyone. As Minister of State for Trade Promotion, Artificial Intelligence and Digital Transformation, I am delighted to welcome you to today's latest webinar on the ever-evolving topic of responsible business, which has a focus on sustainability. Thank you for taking the time to join us as we continue to adapt to this vast but critical area, one that is not just shaping the future of businesses, but also the future of our environment, people's lives and the economy. Given the number of mandatory initiatives introduced over the past number of years, sustainability is no longer an aspirational goal, but an essential part of doing business in today's world. Companies of all sizes, small, medium and large, are increasingly expected to integrate sustainable practices into their operations. Whether it's regulatory compliance, consumer expectations or competitive advantage, sustainability is now at the heart of how businesses operate and grow. This is the latest in a series of responsible business webinars and is designed to help Irish businesses gain further knowledge on what they should do to align with evolving sustainability standards. I fully recognise that navigating this landscape can be complex and continues to evolve. The department and its agencies are here to help. Webinars such as this are an important way to help businesses understand the new responsibilities in this space. These webinars bring together key experts to guide you through the expectations, the challenges, and the opportunities. Today, we will hear from the officials on the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises on responsible business conduct, where we'll discuss how businesses can align their operations with global standards and best practices for sustainability and corporate responsibility. The EU Directive on empowering consumers for the green transition, which ensures consumers have better information on product durability while also protecting them from greenwashing. The presentation today will highlight the steps businesses must take to adapt their evolving consumer protection measures. Finally, we will hear from the Sustainability Capability Development Supports provided by Enterprise Ireland, which will introduce the various initiatives available to help businesses build sustainable competencies, including the Sustainability Kickstarter online workshops, the Sustainability Leaders Programme, and the Sustainable Enterprise Webinar Series. Following the presentations on these three topics, there is a Q&A session where you will have the opportunity to engage directly with our expert panellists. I'd encourage you to take full advantage of the opportunity. Ask questions, share your thoughts, and consider how these insights can be applied within your own business. Sustainability is not just about reducing environmental impact, it is about building resilient businesses that are prepared for the future. By integrating sustainability practices into your business model, we can enhance your brand reputation, improve operational efficiencies, and meet the growing expectations of customers, investors, and regulators. With that, let's continue our journey into sustainable practices, and I hope you find the presentations insightful and take away some key messages that you can act up to drive sustainability change in your area. I'd like to extend my gratitude to our speakers and all of you for participation today. Let's work together to drive meaningful change in Irish businesses and create a more sustainable future.
That's excellent to hear from our Minister. So I'll now hand over to Paul McMahon to speak on the OECD guidelines.
Thank you very much, Owen, and good morning, everybody. I am just going to share my slides here, and hopefully you can see them there. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises on responsible business conduct, simply referred to as the guidelines, particularly focusing on sustainability. Just make sure that the slides are moving through a few. So just to recall, these guidelines provide a comprehensive framework for responsible business conduct, or RBC. They reflect the expectation from governments to enterprises on how to act responsibly, covering all major areas of business ethics to enhance the business contribution to sustainable development and address adverse impacts of business on people, the planet, and society. So they do this by providing principles and standards in RBC consistent with applicable laws and internationally recognized standards. They were first incepted back in 1976, and they've been revised 6 times since then, with the last revision taking place in 2023, which I'll talk about shortly. It's important to point out that the guidelines themselves are voluntary recommendations and therefore are non-binding on enterprises. However, the 52 adhering countries, including Ireland, are bound to implement them. So this means that Ireland has a national contact point, or NCP, to promote and raise awareness of the guidelines and the related due diligence guidance, and to provide a unique grievance mechanism by handling complaints known as specific instances related to the recommendations set out in the guidelines. The Ireland NCP is a standalone unit here located in the department. So the guidelines themselves, they're divided into 2 parts, and the first part relates to the RBC recommendations, which are set out over 11 chapters covering 9 thematic areas, which you'll see there in the box to the right, ranging from the environment to human rights to employment and industrial relations. The second part of the guidelines set out the implementation procedures for adhering countries. So in a way, it's an instruction manual for the NCP. The essence of the guidelines is to avoid adverse impacts directly by the enterprise or indirectly through a business relationship, for example. So to avoid, prevent, and mitigate adverse impacts, enterprises should carry out what's known as due diligence. This means they should introduce a process to identify, prevent, reduce, and account for how they address actual and potential adverse impacts. To assist with this, in 2018, the OECD published its due diligence guidance, and this guidance for RBC provides practical support to enterprises and helps promote a common understanding amongst governments and stakeholders on due diligence for RBC. The guidance sets out the 6 steps due diligence process, which you'll see there, and in addition, there's guidance for 5 specific sectors, which was issued to support enterprise operating in those sectors. So, for example, the garment and footwear sector and the extractive sector. The guidance clarifies how business can operationalize risk-based due diligence into management systems and global supply chains. So, as I mentioned earlier, the last update of the guidelines took place in 2023. and it had been a decade before that since they were previously updated. And given the change that had taken place in the world, a refresh was needed to take account of how enterprises operate in today's world. These targeted updates have taken account of changes such as climate change, the digital world, and the need for resilient and inclusive supply chains. So there are now due diligence recommendations to harness the digital transformation, including the development, financing, sale, licensing, trade, and use of technology. As I mentioned, the implementation procedures that acts as a guide for the NCP has also been updated to advance functional equivalence amongst the 52 NCPs located across the globe, while taking account for the need for flexibility. When looking at sustainability, I suppose we could look at the environment chapter, and there were significant updates to this chapter given the changes that have taken place over the last decade. So the main updates to this environment chapter include clarifying that enterprises should carry out risk-based due diligence to assess and address adverse environmental impacts. A list of non-exhaustive environmental impacts that may be associated with their activities have been included, such as climate change, biodiversity loss, and deforestation. The chapter provides clarity that environmental impacts are understood to mean significant changes in the environment or biota, which have harmful effects on the ecosystems or on the operations of socioeconomic systems or on people. The updates also clarify how an enterprise can be involved with adverse environmental impacts, whether they caused it by their business activities, contributed to the impact through involvement with other entities, or whether it was directly linked through a business relationship. The chapter recognizes the reality of what data is or may be available, or whether relevant standards and benchmarks are available, and that there are often interlinkages with other matters covered by the guidelines, such as health and safety, for example. Just transition is also mentioned here as the update recommends enterprises should assess and address social impacts, including on the workforce, both in their transition away from environmentally harmful practices, as well as towards greener industries and practices. On climate change mitigation and adaptation, the updates recommend that enterprises should ensure their greenhouse gas emissions and impacts on carbon sinks are consistent with internationally agreed global temperature goals. There's also a recommendation here to introduce and implement science-based policies, strategies, and transition plans on climate change mitigation and adaptation, and to review and update the targets regularly. The guidelines emphasize that enterprises should prioritize eliminating or reducing sources of emission over offsetting, compensation, or neutralization measures, while noting that carbon credits or offsets may be considered as a means to address unabated emissions as a last resort. On biodiversity, the updates recommend that enterprises should contribute to the conservation of biodiversity and to prevent or mitigate adverse impacts on biodiversity. On sustainable consumption and production, the recommendations here emphasize that enterprises should adopt technologies to improve environmental performance. They should develop and provide products or services that have no undue environmental impacts, are safe in their intended use, are durable, repairable, and can be reused, recycled, or disposed of safely, and that they are produced in an environmentally sound manner that uses natural resources sustainably, minimize as far as possible energy and material input, as well as generation of pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and waste, in particular hazardous waste, and promote higher levels of awareness amongst consumers or customers of the environmental implications of using their products or services of the enterprise, including by providing relevant and accurate information on their environmental impacts. Animal welfare has also been included here by recommending enterprises should respect animal welfare standards that are aligned with the World Organization for Animal Welfare Terrestrial Code. You can find a lot more information about the Ireland National Contact Point and the guidelines of related due diligence guidance at enterprise.gov.ie /OECD NCP. You can also contact us at oecdncp@enterprise.gov.ie. Thank you for your time this morning. I am now going to pass you over to my colleague Elaine Lynch, who will present on the Empowering Consumers for the Green Transition Directive. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everybody. Just let me share my screen here. sorry, I'm just trying to find go to the first slide. Sorry, excuse me, I have it here now. Okay, so my name is Elaine Lynch and I work with my colleague James here in the Competition and Consumer Policy Unit of the department. And we have recently taken on responsibility for the transposition of the Green Transition Directive. So this morning I hope to provide you just a bit of background on it and some of the implications that it brings. So by way of background here, many of you will know that this directive actually already amends to existing pieces of consumer legislation, and they are the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive and the Consumer Rights Directive. So basically what it does is it adds new provisions to each of those pieces of legislation. So it's one of a package of initiatives set out at EU level and follows on from the new consumer agenda, the Circular Economy Action Plan and the European Green Deal, which in itself has the lofty ambition of zero emissions by 2050, which aims to make Europe the first climate neutral continent. So the Green Transition Directive, it supports and underpins the changes needed in consumer behaviour to achieve these climate and environmental aims. But it doesn't do it by itself. It works in tandem with the Green Claims Directive, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and also the Eco Design Regs and the Right to Repair Directive. So its objective is to empower consumers. So how does it do this? Well, it ensures consumers are provided with better information on the durability and repair of products before they buy them. So that's at the point of sale. So this would equate to traders providing this information to consumers. And it also strengthens their protections against greenwashing and early obsolescence. So it will ban kind of false environmental and durability claims. So really this all kind of comes down to ensuring that consumers can understand, and more importantly really, that they trust the information that they are given about the environmental impacts of the products that they're buying. So it's about enabling consumers to make informed decisions and contribute to more sustainable consumption. So a couple of key dates in relation to this directive. It needs to be transposed by the 27th of March 2026. So that's date for myself and James, and then it will actually come into force 6 months later on the 27th of September 2026, which is the date for trades, I suppose, for traders and for producers. So what are the key provisions of this Act? So the changes to the Consumers' Rights Act in the first place. Traders would need to provide consumers with information on products' durability and repairability when it has been made available to them by the producers in the first place. So before a contract, consumers would be provided with information about after-sales service, which also includes repairs. And alongside that, consumers must also be provided with information on the existence and length of a producer's commercial guarantee, which is again, once a trader has been informed about this by the producers. Traders will be asked to display notices, and in the legislation they're called harmonised notices, in their premises as a reminder to consumers of the existence of the legal guarantee of conformity, which at a minimum is 2 years across the EU, but in some member states it's a little bit longer. So for example, in Ireland, we have a 6-year limitation period. So some changes then to the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. There are a number of characteristics of products that a trader can't withhold information about or mislead a consumer about, and that list has been added to. So for example, it now applies to maybe the working or functioning of products in relation to spare parts or accessories. So the example that they give is that of a printer and printer cartridges. So if a printer will function absolutely fine, absolutely perfectly, using generic, cheaper brand type print cartridges, the consumer needs to be informed about that. But equally, if the printer will only function as it can, only function normally with those print cartridges that are made by the same producer who made the printer, well then the consumer needs to be told that as well. And similarly, claims about the durability of goods, and the example here given is the washing machine. So consumers can't be told that a washing machine in a normal functioning lifespan will do X number of cycles, when actually it won't do that many cycles. And goods can't be sold as repairable when they're not repairable. And in addition, the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, it kind of prohibits a number of practices. So that list has also been added to as well. So those, generic type claims that we see is that where something is eco-friendly or green or a friend of nature, those kinds of general generic claims would be prohibited under this directive unless a trader can demonstrate that they comply with excellent environmental performance. And excellent environmental performance kind of equates to compliance with the Eco-Label Directive or equivalent ISO standards. And also regarding obsolescence, practices that would deliberately plan or design a product with a limited lifespan are prohibited, as are practices to encourage consumers to replace consumables or parts earlier than would be normal. And just finally, with regard to sustainability labels, A sustainability label is a voluntary label that aims to promote or set apart a product or a process by reference to its environmental characteristics or its social characteristics. So these kinds of claims now need to be based on a certification scheme. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the Green Claims Directive. So in the next kind of 2 slides, I've listed most of what I've spoken about here, kind of using the language from the directive. So I kind of cheated a bit here, and my ex-colleague Mary Dempsey, who has moved on to bigger and better things, actually presented to this forum back in December 2023. So these are 2 of the slides that she would have used that listed out all of the items from that are coming in with the directive. So my own little bit of recycling this morning. I know I had mentioned that we have links with the Green Directive. So the Green Claims Directive actually falls to the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications. So the purpose of the Green Claims Directive is to address how companies would often make, I suppose, voluntary environmental claims without maybe evidence, a lot of evidence backing them up. And while it can be misleading for consumers, it's considered it's unfair to companies who are genuinely kind of working to improve their environmental performance. So the Green Claims Directive is actually going to address this type of greenwashing by tackling false environment claims and also stopping maybe the excess of environmental labels that we see on products around us. It complements our directive. Our directive, as we said, bans those generic claims unless, as we mentioned earlier, they meet that threshold of recognised excellent environmental performance. But the Green Claims Directive now will apply to those voluntary type explicit environmental claims. For example, that one there, packaging made from 30% recycled plastic. It will also apply where other rules and EU rules and regulations don't apply. So we're not actually trying to double up on legislation here. So basically the Green Claims Directive will bring in rules as to how these types of claims are substantiated and then verified, and then how they are communicated to the consumers. So according to the Department of the Environment, this directive is still actually under negotiation at the moment. Could change somewhat maybe, but broadly speaking, as it stands at the moment, this is the main aim of this directive, and this is how it interacts with our Green Transition Directive. I mentioned the notices in traders' premises there earlier on. So the Green Transition Directive sets out that a harmonised notice must be displayed in a trader's premises, and it provides information on the legal guarantee of conformity of goods. So why is this and what's the purpose? Well, in the first place, it's a reminder to act as a reminder to consumers actually of the existence of this legal guarantee. And it will inform consumers that they're entitled to ask a seller for a repair, replacement, or a price reduction or a full refund when the products that they bought are defective or don't match the description, and that's where the conformity bit comes in. And it will also include a reference to the minimum 2-year legal protection period as provided for in the Sale of Goods Directive, and this applies across the EU, but as you've mentioned earlier, in some member states it's longer, including Ireland. A harmonised label is also being introduced, and this will be used when a producer then separately offers a consumer a commercial guarantee of durability at no extra cost, and it covers the whole product and has a duration of more than 2 years. And again, producers will need to tell traders that they have this harmonised label, that they have this commercial guarantee of durability. And the aim of this is to increase the availability of commercial guarantees generally, and to increase consumers' understanding and knowledge of them, so that they begin to start choosing products that have a longer lifespan. So the thing about the harmonised notice and the harmonised label is actually that the Commission, the EU Commission, are working on the design of both at the moment, and they have actually conducted a number of workshops and surveys for both the consumer and traders' views across 10 different member states, including Ireland. So they're trying to make sure that they get representative views across kind of all the regions, big member states, small member states, and they're looking at through gender, age, educational level and disability, kind of, I suppose, really from a visual impairment point of view, because they want to make sure that the notices that are up in shops and that are recognisable and understandable by people. So really, we expect to see final versions of this in September of this year, so September 2025. I suppose when we think of all this, do consumers actually want all these changes? And CCPC research in 2023 would say that 70% of us are actually happy to pay more for a product that is actually environmentally friendly. And according to EU research, 94% of us say that actually protecting the environment is personally important to us. So this is kind of against the backdrop of those other statistics here, like where we can see that 53% of green claims at the minute seem to give vague, misleading kind of information. And there's over 230 different sustainability labels in the EU at the moment. And like, this is where we talk about sort of understanding for consumers and where trust comes into play, because it's difficult to see where we can trust what we see or what we're told on labels when there's actually so many of them and there's no set criteria against which they can be accredited against. So impacts for business. There will possibly be, I suppose, compliance costs for producers who have generic environmental claims on their products or use sustainability labels, or for example, say that a product is free from X, like lead or something like that, but X or lead is actually already disallowed from those products by law anyway. So all of those types of claims will need to be considered in the light of our Green Transition Directive and also the Green Claims Directive, and then to see if they need to be updated in any way or if they need to be substantiated. There are already penalties in place for breach of the legislation that's in place already, and those penalties will continue. We do think there are benefits, that the 70% of consumers who actually do want to spend more on actual environmentally friendly products will be in a position to know what those products are, that those products actually are what they say they are. And this kind of common approach for green claims kind of across the EU sort of allows companies to compete on a more level playing field and should boost the competitiveness of companies who are actually increasing their environmental sustainability of the products that they are selling. We're not alone in our efforts here. There's actually been a number of changes across the EU in terms of kind of repairability and sustainability, and trying to make this whole process work easier for both consumers and traders. And just to give you an example of what's happening in France at the minute, France intends to ensure that product durability actually becomes as important as product safety. And they have introduced both mandatory and voluntary information systems. So they introduced energy labels on vehicles and household appliances in an effort to sort of increase the trust levels of consumers. And they also established a repairability index in 2020 as a way to achieve climate targets. And the repairability index showed how repairable a product actually is. So that from 2024 has gradually been replaced with a durability index, because durability looks at how long a product can be used rather than how often it needs to be repaired. And they've introduced an environmental index, and that's still voluntary at the minute, and it's only in two sectors, clothing and food. And in the clothing sector, it's been used to sort of try to tackle fast fashion. So while there are challenges in relation to it, French authorities will say the reaction is generally positive, because consumers actually want green products that are recyclable or repairable, excuse me. And this provides for them easy to access sort of visual information that they can see what they're looking at. So it works both in favor of buying the product and selling the product, because these indexes are now being used by producers in France as a marketing tool for their products, and in particular when they are addressing those products towards younger consumers. So in conclusion, just to say, I know I have thrown a lot of information at you, I suppose, but the main takeaways are this directive will come into force on the 27th of September 2026. It's considered that the impact will be substantial, given the additional information to be provided to consumers by traders, and notices regarding the 2-year legal guarantee being displayed, the banning of generic green claims, which may require changes to existing labels or packaging. We as a department will continue to engage with business through our forums, through the retail and enterprise forums, with further updates as we get them. So finally, I just want to say thank you so much for your time this morning, and apologies to Owen and his team, because I think I've gone over on my time. I'm happy to take any questions, but just to say at the outset, I may not be able to answer them all, but I will get back to you. And we're also very happy to take any obs or comments that you might have, because that actually be useful for us in our thinking ahead on this. So thanks very much again. I'll stop sharing, and I'm going to hand over to Joanne now. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks. Jessica's going to help me with my presentation today. Thanks, Jessica. So hello, everybody. My name is Joanne Sheehan. I work on the Sustainability Solutions team in Enterprise Ireland, and I'm going to talk a bit today about Enterprise Ireland's Sustainability Capability Development Programme. So it is a bit of a mouthful, but we'll get there. So next slide, please. So I just want to initially, I suppose, define sustainability. And for us in Enterprise Ireland and in business, sustainability refers to doing business without negatively impacting the environment, community, or society as a whole. And I suppose as the world aims for net zero emissions by 2050, this transition to a low carbon, more sustainable economy has undoubtedly become a defining force for business. And just to kind of break that down even more within Enterprise Ireland, I suppose this year we have developed an Enterprise Ireland sustainability plan for the organisation. It's the first time that we've done this. And part of that plan are 3 key commitments around sustainability, one of which is that 80% of Enterprise Ireland supported companies have sustainability plans and are measuring their scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2029. So we can really see that trickle down piece. We can see how important it's becoming, not just globally, not just at European level, nationally, but also within the organisation now. There are key commitments, I suppose, driving this agenda. And for us and for developing the capability development supports and all of the supports around sustainability, that's really important. So next slide, please. I also want to touch on the business benefits. There's been a huge amount of change around, I suppose, the regulations and some of the drivers for sustainability. So it's even more important that there's clarity about the benefits for engaging in sustainability and the advantages that it provides to your business. There's a competitive advantage that sustainable businesses and products lead to increased brand loyalty and reoccurring sales, which we see. There's cost savings, inevitably, energy efficiency, the adoption of renewable energy and lean methods drive cost competitiveness across businesses. There's the value creation piece. So where companies are willing to develop new sustainable products and services to meet customer demands and to access new markets, there's opportunity there. There's also the piece around attracting and retaining talent. So we see time and time again, career professionals, graduates want to work in companies who value sustainability in an authentic way. There's the attracting investment piece, there's building brand reputation, and there's still that stick, I suppose they're all the carrots, there's still that stick around compliance and regulation. So ensuring that you're meeting the requirements of upcoming sustainability reporting requirements, regulation, legislation, and I suppose in engagement with your supply chain as well. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to concentrate on two of our, I suppose, core programs within the capability development supports that are available through Enterprise Ireland. I'm going to talk about the Sustainability Kickstarter workshops and the Sustainability Leaders program after that. So the Sustainability Kickstarter workshops kicked off in October 2023, and since then we've actually held closer to 25 workshops. We've had closer to 500 attendees, and these are free to attend for Enterprise Ireland, Local Enterprise Office and Údarás na Gaeltachta client companies. They're 3-hour online introduction to sustainability workshops. They're not webinars, they're really interactive. There's lots of Mentimeter, breakout sessions, lots of talking, discussing with SMEs around kind of issues relating to sustainability. They're aimed at senior leaders within small, medium-sized companies or sustainability champions, and the workshops are open to all sectors and all companies at different stages of growth. They were developed very much with the idea that, you know, if you can't make a workshop 1 week, you can jump into one 2 weeks later. It's the same content. So to, I suppose, support SMEs, Irish SMEs particularly, who often don't have a lot of time, don't have a lot of resources, that there's lots of options there that you can jump onto the next one if you need to. Some of the takeaways for participants that, you know, participants would understand market drivers and the regulatory context, which we mentioned previously, as well as being able to start to articulate and communicate why sustainability is important to their business. Making that link between sustainability strategy and business strategy and really trying to bring those two things together. You'll also gain an understanding of how to measure and monitor and report sustainability performance, which is incredibly important. And the workshops, the Kickstarters, use the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is, I think, a really useful framework to kind of provide an overview and context of the full scope of sustainability, not just necessarily the emissions piece, the carbon piece, but all of the different aspects to sustainability. And I suppose that's what's most relevant to smaller companies, smaller Irish companies. At the end of the workshops, you're also asked to build out a sustainability action plan. And really, this is just a couple of next steps to allow you to continue your journey, or to allow participants to continue their journey and to have something tangible that they're walking away with. Not mentioned there, but what's also covered in the workshop is all of the supports that are available through Enterprise Ireland. So you get a lot of information if you attend one of the Kickstarters around kind of the full scope of sustainability within our organisation and the supports that are available through the organisation too. We have 5 workshops happening through spring that kicked off on the 28th of March. So we've had 2 to date, but there's still plenty of spaces available, and the 3 that are coming up between now and the middle of June. So if you haven't joined a Kickstarter before, it's a great way of finding out more about sustainability, how it might relate to your business, and kind of where Enterprise Ireland sits around sustainability and the supports that are available as well. Next slide, please. I also want to talk about the Sustainability Leaders Programme. So this is a programme that we've been running since about the end of 2023 also. We've brought nearly 200 Enterprise Ireland client companies through this programme. We've had about 6 workshops or 6 cohorts come through to date. This is a partnership that we have with the SkillNet Climate Ready Academy. And we have a programme, a cohort kicking off on the 8th of May. So I'm very much here to promote that as well. If there is anybody that's interested, that's an Enterprise Ireland client and that might like to join, do reach out. For the workshop or for the program that's happening on the 8th of May, it's 6 workshops, each lasting 2 hours, run over 6 weeks. But typically this is run over 12 weeks. So just because we're heading into the summer, we've condensed it somewhat. And the topics here cover identifying your sustainability priorities, integrating sustainability into your business, and communicating and reporting. It's live instructor-led online workshop sessions, and participants have access to a virtual learning environment where they can join live sessions and access all of the materials and resources that come out of it. And it's free to Enterprise Ireland client companies. This is a much more integrated program, I suppose, than the Kickstarters. What we often find is that somebody who's gone on the Kickstarter might then go into one of the Sustainability Leader programs and do that 12-week course to kind of develop out their sustainability strategy. Some of the takeaways: it provides practical support and guidance to the people responsible for developing a sustainability for their site. There's a dual target there as well of developing training skills at an individual level, but also delivering tangible impacts at an organizational level. And I suppose most importantly, and where the most value is with this program that we see time and time again, is that trainees create a sustainability charter at the end of the 12 weeks or 6 weeks in kind of the case of the ones kicking off on the 8th of May for their business. And this captures the business case for action and an agreed action plan for the next 12 months. And that very much links back to that commitment that Enterprise Ireland now has around ensuring that 80% of our clients have a sustainability plan in place by 2029. So by going through this program, developing your sustainability charter, you're very much, developing a sustainability plan for your business that you can move forward on. As I said, again, just to highlight, the next cohort is kicking off on the 8th of May. And if anybody here is interested in joining that, if you're an Enterprise Ireland client company, do reach out. So next slide, please. I also just want to touch on the Green Transition Fund, so the other supports that are available. The fund is comprised of 2 separate streams, which support the different aspects of the decarbonisation and sustainability journey for Irish companies: the Climate Planning Fund for Business and the Enterprise Emissions Reduction Investment Fund. Next slide, please. So under the Climate Planning Fund for Business, there's 4 supports: a climate action voucher, €1,800 funding for advisory support to develop an initial decarbonisation or sustainability or circular economy action plan. There's Green Start, which is up to €5,000 support to access advice to introduce sustainability best practice into your business. There's Green Plus, which is €50,000 support for training projects and to build capability within your organisation. And there's the strategic consultancy grant as well to support projects of strategic significance. We also have the Enterprise Emissions Reduction Investment Fund, even more of a mouthful than the Capability Development Supports Programmes. And under that, there is funding for, there's capital investment for energy monitoring and tracking systems. There's capital investment for decarbonisation processes and decarbonisation processes. There's also the energy and environmental aid funding that's available, which is really significant funding for sustainable production practices within your enterprise. And there's all of the Enterprise Ireland innovation and R&D supports as well, which can be used for sustainability and decarbonisation types projects. So next slide, please. Over the last couple of months, we've developed a kind of a suite of case studies, and I think this is the best way to show kind of how the supports can help companies to see some of our clients who have used the full suite of sustainability support. So O'Brien Fine Foods, a large consumer food manufacturer, they came to us and they initially did a Kickstarter workshop, so 3-hour introduction to sustainability workshop. They went on, they spoke to their client advisor, and through that, they also accessed 3 Green Pluses, so up to €150,000 of support to help them develop out their sustainability strategies, develop a sustainability framework and policies to align to environmental management and energy management frameworks under ISO 14001 and ISO 50001. And it allowed them to kind of start to prioritize sustainability issues, identify risks and opportunities, and engage with their stakeholders. Next slide, please. Voya is another example, a global skincare and luxury products brand. They did a sustainability Kickstarter workshop. They then went on to do the Sustainability Leaders Program, where they developed a charter for their business. And then they got a green start, so a little bit of funding to help them to achieve B Corp certification. B Corp is a sustainability certification, internationally recognized certification. So they used that to engage with somebody, with a consultant who had experience with B Corp, to fill out their B impact assessment, to undertake a gap analysis based on their initial score, and to develop and improve plans and scope initiatives and policies to improve their ESG impacts. And just the last case study is the next slide, please. Core Air Packs. This is my favorite one because they did everything. So they got the most out of Enterprise Ireland. So they're a really good example. They did the Kickstarter program. They went on to do a Sustainability Leaders program, that 12-week course where they developed their charter. And then they got a green start. They got 3 Green Pluses, so up to €150,000 of support, as well as getting capital funding for putting in a energy monitoring and tracking system. And the case study here focuses on what they took from the Sustainability Leaders program. So they were able to develop a holistic sustainability charter, which identified opportunities and actions. They increased their knowledge and skills around sustainability through that process. They were able to figure out kind of some of the related risks and opportunities. They used the UN SDGs, put targets in place, and doing that work with the SLP then allowed them, with the Sustainability Leaders program, allowed them to access the kind of follow-on funding that's available through our Green Transition Fund, through Green Start, Green Plus, and through the Energy Monitoring and Tracking grant that's available too. So just next slide, please. I also want to just highlight our Sustainable Enterprise webinar series, which is kicking off today. So you can go from this webinar, and at lunchtime, you can jump into Enterprise Ireland's webinar, which you can still sign up to on our website, which is going to focus on sustainability trends for business in 2025. So that's happening today at lunchtime. And we will have a series of these webinars over the next couple of weeks, covering different relevant topics around the area of sustainability. Next up is eco-design for sustainable products regulation, then ESG policies, green public procurement, smart metering, sustainability reporting for SMEs, and the EU Omnibus. So between now and the middle of June, there's a whole host of webinars that will then all be available on our website as well, so you can access them on our website at any stage once they've been completed. Just the next slide, please. And this series follows on from a whole host of, or a big batch of webinars that we carried out through 2023 and 2024, which are all available on our website and which are a really good reference point for kind of dipping into different sustainability topics relevant to Irish business, Irish SMEs. So everything from what a sustainability action, what a climate action journey might look like, to B Corp, what that is. I mentioned it previously in relation to Voya, to the circular economy, green skills, how to measure your scope 3 emissions, social sustainability, as well as the business case for biodiversity. So there's a significant bank of information there that I would, I would say to anybody to access at any stage. Just the next slide, please. We also have a video podcast series that you can access on our website as well. This is a really great way to hear from companies, from leaders within Irish companies about how they use some of the Enterprise Ireland supports, whether it's the Kickstarter, the SLP, the Climate Planning Fund for Business, to support their sustainability journey. O'Brien Fine Foods, which I mentioned also, are also part of the batch of video podcasts that we have available on our website as well. Next slide, please. So that's it. So what's the next steps after today? If you're an Enterprise Ireland client, I would say reach out to your client advisor for a one-to-one session with somebody from my team to talk about kind of next steps relating to sustainability. You can reach out to my team, the Sustainability Solutions team, directly through green@enterpriseireland.com. Visit the Enterprise Ireland website. That's where all of the resources, the webinars, where you can sign up to the Kickstarters, where you can sign up to the SLP, all information on all of the funding supports is as well. And I suppose as a call to action, if you think it's relevant, I suppose to highlight again the upcoming training programs, particularly the SkillNet Enterprise Ireland Sustainability Leaders Programme, where we have our next cohort kicking off on the 8th of May, and there won't be another one really until autumn, I suppose late autumn. So it's a really kind of good opportunity if you want to do something before the summer around sustainability and dig into kind of what a sustainability plan for your business might be. There's an opportunity there to do it. And I would always say to everybody to have a look at the Climate Toolkit for Business. It's the best way of kind of, I suppose, understanding the starting point and where you are in relation to your carbon footprint, to your sustainability journey as an Irish SME. So that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Joanne. Quite a lot packed in there, and it's actually excellent to see the department and its agencies working, very closely together, really aligned thinking on everything from sustainability to the wider kind of circular economy and environmental stuff. So it's very important. And as I said, this webinar will be available on our website afterwards. So a lot of these great information, if so much going at you, it's quite hard to take sometimes. So it'll be worthwhile that this is available to look back on. And as Joanna said, that there's a considerable library both on Enterprise Ireland and on our own website, just to give some pointers and some information. So as I said, we'd have a question and answers session here afterwards, and I will direct a number of questions to each of our panelists. I have noted that there is quite a number of questions coming in on the omnibus package, and in particular on the CSDD. I think it would be best that will be directed to our colleagues who are specifically looking after that. And I can say that you can direct that to our CSDD at enterprise.gov.ie for those specific questions on that, because they have the real expertise on it. And it is obviously currently a very fluid area which hasn't had all its final decisions on. So they will be the best to answer that. And we'll have that in the text there that you can see that particular contact point. So I'm going to go in order of the presenters that we had today. We have a couple of questions each. So I might start with Paul then. A couple of questions here. The first one is information available on complaints handled by the Irish or the Ireland NCP?
Thanks, Owen, for that. Yeah. So transparency is something that's really important to the NCP and NCPs in general, and something that we strive towards. So at the Ireland NCP, we do actually publish our statements relating to complaints. So actually, if you go into enterprise.gov.ie/OECD NCP, you will find a tab along the right-hand side called Specific Instances, and there you'll get information on all the complaints that the Ireland NCP is handling or has handled. And just to say as well, the complaints are actually the statements are sent on to the OECD to put onto their database also.
Thank you. I think that's quite clear. There's another one. This is actually a bit more esoteric, but you might be able to answer it. So the guidelines for the OECD are a voluntary code. How do they fit into the current EU evolving landscape that has introduced mostly mandatory measures? So how does the voluntary work with the mandatory?
Yeah, I think having this, what's known as a smart mix, voluntary and mandatory, is actually a really useful and important approach that we continue to see. There have been calls from many stakeholders over the last number of years that, the voluntary initiatives didn't have the teeth that were needed, and that's why we've seen so many mandatory initiatives introduced. What I would say is that the voluntary initiatives do still play a really important part here. And for me, if I look at the guidelines, for example, they nearly act like a foundation or a framework that, the EU or whatever institutions can then build mandatory initiatives around. So, for example, the mandatory initiatives that have been introduced, you will see a lot of times that they will refer back to maybe the guidelines, or they could refer back to the United Nations Guiding Principles or the ILO, for example. And, there's this international alignment. For example, even within the guidelines themselves, the human rights chapter is aligned with the UNGPs. The employment industrial relations chapter is aligned with the ILO, standards. So this alignment, I think, is very important, and I think it's something that businesses and all stakeholders actually appreciate, because it gives a bit of coherence and consistency, which is something that I think is very important in today's world.
Yes, thank you. And obviously, it has quite a significant history as well, having been around for many decades, which some of the regulations and directives don't have. So it kind of gives the history of how it's developed over the years and what I suppose, the thinking is on from various member states and nations on that. I'll move on to Elaine now. We've a couple of questions in, and I will have to defer to your much greater knowledge than mine. I have to say I'm not sure what exactly this will mean, but the first question is, where will I get the harmonised notice?
Well, I suppose the harmonised notice, we don't have to do anything about it yet, because we don't actually know what it looks like, what it's going to finally look like yet. The Commissioner in the process of designing the notice, and it will be the same one that's used across all member states, and the information on it will be correct and applicable in all member states. So we're not expecting to see what it will finally look like till September of this year. Now, the Commission have said it will be easily reproduced. We're actually not sure what the practicalities are about in getting it and distributing out to traders, but once we do, we will let people know. And I suppose the thing to remember, is that it actually will apply online and offline as well. So the notice will need to be on display for consumers to see it before they make their final purchase.
Great. So still a lot of items in the work there, but yeah, good.
There is a bit of them, yeah.
Yeah. And there's another one on yours, so I'll do two each, and as I said, we can have the last ones can be answered maybe when we send them to the various emails and that. But there's another one here. Who will monitor the compliance with the new directive? That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I suppose a final decision hasn't been made on that one yet, but at the minute the CCPC have responsibility under the Consumer Rights Act and the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. So they're the two pieces of legislation that are being amended by the Green Claims Transition. It sounds like it would make sense that it be the CCPC, but to be honest, a final decision hasn't been made on that as yet. But they are the body who look after the enforcement at the moment for those issues.
Which, yes, a lot of responsibility on the consumer side and other areas. So that's great. Thank you, Elaine. You're off the hook now. So I'll move on to Joanne with some more questions here. Okay, I'm just reading through it here. Is there support available to engage staff in external or internal sustainability training initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not just the programs that I mentioned, the Kickstarter and the Sustainability Leaders Programme. Through Green Plus, which is under the Climate Planning Fund for Business, you can get up to €50,000 support to to engage with a consultant to come into your organisation to support training, or to send colleagues, staff on relevant sustainability training programs. So actually on our website, and if you're an Enterprise Ireland client, you can access through your own portal on every Enterprise Ireland client has a portal on the website. You can access a directory of training providers, of sustainability training courses and providers that are available. It's not exhaustive, so if there's something else that's relevant to you on circular economy, on decarbonisation, on whatever it might be that you find, you can reach out to us and we can evaluate that and see if Green Plus might be suitable for it. So yeah, for sure.
That's great, and we'll have our last question here now, and I'll keep it to you, Joanne, but it's a sequencing question, actually. Do you have to go through a Kickstarter to get on the EI Sustainability Leaders Programme?
No, absolutely not. We often find, I think I mentioned that a lot of companies come through a Kickstarter initially. It's a good introductory workshop. It's 3 hours. The same content is kind of run through every other week over spring, through the autumn into winter. And it's a good introduction to sustainability. It's a good way of finding out more about the supports. And we see a lot of initial Kickstarter alumni jumping into the Sustainability Leaders Programme after that. The Sustainability Leaders Programme is for Enterprise Ireland clients only. The Kickstarters are for local enterprise office, Enterprise Ireland clients, Udros na Gaeltachta companies too. But no, you can reach out to us directly if you think the SLP is right for you. And as I said, the next one's happening on the 8th of May. If you think it sounds good, a 6-week course, every week, kind of a 2-hour online session, and at the end you walk away with a sustainability plan for your business. If you think that's something that you think you might want to do, regardless of whether you've gone on a Kickstarter before, you can reach out directly at green@enterpriseireland.com and sign up to that.
Excellent. So we're coming up on the hour here. I think we've timed it quite nicely. We've had some very good questions, and obviously we've left up a number of contact email addresses there to contact on specifics if you wish to follow up, and just to direct you to our responsible business webpage on there. Just as a final act, I'd really like to thank each of our panelists, Paul, Elaine and Joanne, for taking time out and for giving the presentations. I think they're informative. I hope you as the audience found that. And I'd also like to thank the Minister for taking time out of her schedule to record that message for us. So without further ado, I'm going to call a close to this webinar. And again, just thank you for your participation in this.